Despite putting on a brilliant performance at UFC 282, Israel Adesanya fell short and couldn't defend the middleweight title against his arch-nemesis Alex Pereira. And even though this is the third consecutive time Izzy has failed to put away the Brazilian, UFC commentator Joe Rogan thinks he's handling the loss better than anybody else. It still must hurt though. The Nigerian was on his way to becoming the most dominating champion in the UFC. Keep watching for more. First up, losing in style. We're not taking anything away from Pereira, but the truth is, he got picked apart by Izzy in all 5 rounds. The last sequence definitely went in favor of the Brazilian, but apart from that, Adesanya had everything under control throughout the fight. He was clearly fighting out of his shell as he exposed himself by continuously entering the line of fire to take Alex head on. Now, he did end up losing the fight, but we gotta hand it to him. He lost with so much style. UFC commentator Joe Rogan was blown away and thought this was the best response to a loss at the promotion in a very long time. The dude shows up to the press conference with an effing fur coat like a king. Dope watch on and just says, he got me. And what made everything even more graceful is he didn't try to undermine the match referee or his opponent. Izzy was furious at the referee and thought he called the fight off a bit too early. But it was all cool after a couple of minutes. The Nigerian realized he was just doing his job and trying to protect him. Even with Alex, Israel had nothing negative to say and said he beat him fair and square. A lot of people thought Adesanya would crumble if he wasn't able to beat Pereira. But if anything, it seems like he'll only come back stronger now. He's pumped and can't wait to share the cage with him again. Next, a stationary target. Like the majority of fans and analysts, Joe also thought Alex was smart with the early leg kicks as he managed to compromise Izzy's mobility. And while the Brazilian kept trying to land them on target, it was actually a kick he checked that ended up doing the most damage. We're not sure what it was, but Izzy claimed it damaged his nerve and bothered him the entire fight. He said it felt like his leg and feet were just switching off after every 15 seconds. Those calf kicks have changed the game. Joe's right, because let's go back to the last round of the fight. When Pereira starts hitting Izzy with a fury of strikes, it's like he's a stationary target. He's trying his best to get out of the way, but his leg just isn't responding. Who knows? Maybe if his mobility wasn't compromised, he might have been able to tire out the Poatan and defend his title for the 6th consecutive time. Alex, on the other hand, isn't really convinced. He thinks Izzy would have fallen even if his leg wasn't compromised. And we're not gonna lie, Izzy was clearly stunned after those brutal punches. He wasn't exactly on the floor with his eyes rolled back in his head or something, but it was enough for the match referee to call off the fight. And while we think Alex did just enough to win the title, we still think this rivalry deserves a rematch because Izzy had it in the bag. If he didn't hurt his leg so early in the fight, the results might have been different. Moving on, drinking with Andrew. If you're into watching podcasts, then there's no way you haven't seen the one with Andrew Schultz and Joe Rogan. It was so legendary. Joe shows up with a box of cigars and continues to pour drinks for the crew for 3 hours straight. And speaking of Andrew Schultz, Israel Adesanya also made an appearance on the podcast just days after his loss. He also had a few drinks and talked about how he wasn't really upset or disappointed with what had happened.
I've had bigger disappointments in my life.
How do you handle
much bigger disappointments?
And it was probably the first or second time we've seen Izzy talk about defeat, so it was just really enlightening to watch. The way he thought about things after the loss and his overall mindset was just incredible. Izzy said he'd continue to fight Alex until he beats him. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is a true champion. He's refusing to give up despite losing 3 down to the Brazilian. He went on Andrew Schultz's podcast on Monday. They were drinking, having fun. He handled it very well. Joe probably missed his time on the podcast when he got lit with the crew, but anyway, the UFC commentator also touched on the early stoppage and thought it was perfectly normal. Alex wasn't going to stop until he knocked him out, and Izzy was clearly in a really awkward position. Mark Goddard made the right call and probably saved the Nigerian from getting brutally folded for the 2nd time by his rival. Following up, was it an upset? A lot of people thought this was an upset since Alex was an underdog going into the fight, and while Izzy was a favorite to come out victorious, we think both fighters were equally matched. And if you thought it was an upset, wait till you hear about these fights. The year is 2007 and we're tuned into UFC 69. MMA legend Georges St-Pierre is taking on Matt Serra with the welterweight title on the line. Now GSP was a massive favorite and fans thought he would just cruise into an easy victory, but Serra had some other plans. He managed to catch St-Pierre with a vicious right hand to win the fight and upset every single person person in the arena. No one thought it could be done, and it probably goes down as one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. Holly Holm did the same thing when she put away the one and only Ronda Rousey to win the women's bantamweight title. Ronda was blowing up back then. She was the face of the UFC, and along with being really good in front of the camera, she was really dominant inside the cage. Everyone expected her to sweep Holly off her feet, but what happened was the exact opposite. Holm landed a picture-perfect kick to Rousey's chin, followed by a deadly ground and pound to stun the champ for good. It was an amazing fight, but a massive upset. People were shocked to see the invincible Ronda Rousey on the octagon floor. Up next, it's always the ladies. We don't think the women's division gets enough credit. The ladies have always been on top of their game with some jaw-dropping performances. And honestly speaking, it's no surprise how many of the upsets happen in that division. One of the most recent upsets was actually a year back in December 2021 when Julianna Pena defeated Amanda Nunes to win the bantamweight title. But how exactly is this an upset? Well, if you know, you know. And in case you don't, let's just say Amanda Nunes is the GOAT of women's MMA. She was on a 12-fight win streak dating back to 2015. Almost every single fighter thought the only way she'd give up the belt was if she retired. But Julianna shocked the fight world when she scored a second-round submission to put an end to her winning streak and steal the title. Rose Namajunas also did something similar when she beat Joanna Jedrzejczyk with a beautiful left hand to put the Polish fighter away for good. Fans thought Rose had no chance since she was an average fighter, but she proved everyone wrong that night. And the best part, she did it again about 5 months later in a rematch. Last but not least, the Spider. Remember the time when Anderson Silva was at the top of the world? He wasn't just the greatest fighter in MMA, but his fame was global. He was widely regarded as the greatest fighter of that era, and don't be mistaken, nothing has changed. The Spider still goes down as perhaps the greatest MMA fighter of all time, or at least of this era. He was so dominant inside the cage, and his opponents would often enter the fight having already lost the fight. Anderson was an expert at mental warfare before and during the fight. He'd defeat his opponents mentally before putting them through absolute torture. But since we're talking about upsets, you probably know where this is going. Chris Weidman stopped the Spider in his tracks and prevented him from becoming the most dominant champion of all time. Silva was in control of the fight and even taunted Chris for not engaging. But everything changed in the second when Weidman caught the Brazilian with a left hook, ending the fight and silencing the entire arena. As Silva fell flat on the octagon floor, Chris proceeded to land a fury of strikes to end the fight and lift the middleweight title. That's it from our side, folks. So what do you think? Will Israel Adesanya be able to win back the title in their rematch? Let us know in the comments below. Remember, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more exciting videos in the future. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.